Welcome to the Hawkeye Psychic Hurling Podcast with your host, Mark Kennedy. Joined this week by Kieran Collins and Rory Walsh. Lads, how are things?
Very good, Mark.
Very good, man.
Great. Yeah, we nearly had a Wi-Fi disaster here in Galway, but thankfully we're all restored. Again, guys, we'll probably preview the weekend that's in it. Semi-finals, the All-Ireland Senior Hurling Championship is fast approaching. We have two watering fixtures in Limerick versus Galway and also Kilkenny versus Clare. We'll also look at the Camogie. Some intriguing matchups as curtain raisers to the senior game, so we'll maybe touch upon that as well. I suppose, guys, let's start from the start. I mean, Saturday afternoon and evening. I suppose we'll focus on Limerick versus Galway first, Kieran, and I suppose as a Limerick man, what are your kind of main pre-game kind of talking points really heading into this fixture?
Yeah, I suppose first thing to start off is like with so little media or little to none media attention this week, like you wouldn't think there's All Ireland semi-finals coming up this weekend. Like it's just been so quiet in the media and in the news, and I suppose it's strange really. And I think as well the scheduling of the games. Jesus, like we often question it, but like 6 o'clock on a Saturday evening for two counties that are 2 or 3 hours away from Dublin, I think it's you'd often wonder who makes these decisions. But I suppose looking at the game, I think even across the four teams, the question is who's going to start, who's going to play. I think out of, I suppose they all have injury woes. Like I think even Galway's, like earlier this week, Jason Flynn, okay, maybe he wouldn't have been starting, but, I think he was a real impact off the bench and a real goal threat off the bench when he came in every time he played this year. I think for Limerick, then you look at, Declan Hannon obviously has been named recently, and of Sean Finn as well to add to that. I suppose the big discussion in Limerick is who plays six. I suppose it's divided a lot of people's opinions, and there's I suppose in a good way, there's a couple of live options that you could play there. So I suppose there is, something for, decisions for Kylie and Connacht to make. And I think, we get in the Clare Kilkenny game later on. I suppose there's injuries on both sides there, but I think that will probably be a huge factor for the game is that, if Hannon doesn't play, we know how good he is, I suppose. And the thing about Limerick is because he's rarely been injured, we don't know how to play without him or what it's going to be like to play without him. Such a cool, collective character back there, and like the ball distribution is unbelievable. So how do they replace that without leaving holes elsewhere? I think historically, Kylie and Connacht don't throw too many curveballs in. They probably play it safe selection-wise. So I don't see him rejigging a whole back unit just to fill this, jersey. I think it'll be a straightforward player in, player out kind of swap. Just conscious of, what they have everywhere else. And I think, like, if you're looking at Kyle Hayes maybe stepping in, you're nullifying the threat Kyle Hayes gives you going forward. I think for me personally, I think it's if we're to go with a safer option, I think bringing Dan Morrissey to six, such a versatile player, and bringing in Richie English cornerback, I suppose moving Mike Casey in fullback. But then I suppose look, it opens up question marks elsewhere. We all know, like in the last two games, Conor Whelan's been on fire. 2-6 from play, and I suppose out around that half forward line, you'd be kind of thinking who's going to pick him up or give him special attention. Look, we know Limerick don't man mark, but I'm sure, in certain areas of the field, you're going to keep an eye out for this guy and where he's roaming around. So I suppose there's lots of matchups to get right. But both teams are probably coming into it not on top form, I would say. I think certain players struggling for form on both sides. So there's a lot of question marks on both sides, and I suppose until 6 o'clock Saturday evening, I suppose team selection won't be known really, because I think the teams you get to get announced over the next 12 hours, I take that with a pinch of salt.
Yeah, Rory, we'll get you in here. I suppose what are your kind of initial thoughts leading into this Limerick Galway fixture?
I suppose last year, one thing that was a major difference coming on the stretch was the strength of Limerick's bench. And I think Shefflin has tried to rejig things this year in terms of keeping some power on the bench to come in. And we saw that when they were on the rack at the very end against Tipperary. Tom Monaghan, as we saw, come on and scored 3 points. You had Connor Cooney come in and actually, made a difference when he came in as well near the end. And so that's why maybe Jason Flynn loss is a big one, because he was another man they could bring in. The only thing saying that is, like, to do that, he kind of sacrificed starting his best six forwards the last day. I just thought Brian Concannon is very off form at the minute, and unless he's found his form in the 2 weeks since the quarter final, like, Shefflin has a dilemma here. Does he start Monaghan, who was really coming into form, or does he stick with what he had the last day and leave a bit of strength in the bench? So it's kind of getting the balance right there, and that's why it might be a factor. With Conor Whelan last year, Limerick handled him quite well, I thought, in the semi-final last year. But now I suppose Kevin Cooney as well is just another threat inside for the long ball. So he's really kind of giving Galway a boost, and we saw that against Tip, where they were able to go long at times. Maybe they went long too often at times when they hadn't the ball worked out far enough from the backs. But look, it makes the game. I think Galway are probably a bit stronger than they were last year. But I suppose it is all on the day. Like last year, they came very close to Limerick. They're probably a bit stronger this year, Galway. But then, as we said, like Limerick as well have had a few weeks kind of recover from their injuries. We know the strength of Kinnerk in terms of getting tactics and matchups right and everything like that. So it's still a really difficult one to call. Limerick's experience maybe versus kind of Galway coming along and having maybe a stronger bench history than last year. So yeah, that's what makes it so intriguing.
Yeah, because I mean, in fairness to Galway, I suppose you can review the championship campaign all you want. That provincial final loss, particularly to Killian Buckley last minute goal, I think I've said it before in this podcast. In previous years, that would have destroyed a Galway senior hurling team. They would have gone out in the quarterfinals. But all credit to Henry Shefflin and management and players. They really stood up against Tipperary, asked the hard questions at Tipperary, really didn't let him settle. And I think they were deserving winners here, Kieran. And I suppose there's a few wrongs from last season need to be corrected here on Saturday. When you think of last season here, Kieran, the shot selection, the shot accuracy from Galway really did let them down, particularly in that opening period. And there's probably something that they will really focus on Saturday and really try to make that count.
I think there's a couple of ways you could look at Galway's form this year to date. Like, I suppose the early game, the first game against Kilkenny, the draw, like you'd probably write that game off. There's probably a lot of shadow boxing in that game. But like, fast forward to the Dublin game, in that first half, like they were shocking, and okay, they clawed it back in the second half, but you have to look at it like, from, I suppose, for Shefflin's point of view, he's not going to let that first half slide. Coming toward the end of a round robin, series, and then you go to the Kilkenny game where, Kilkenny were, so good in that first half, and I suppose Galway came strong. Galway were very strong in the second half, and I suppose it's that collapse. It's that not seeing out the game. We've talked about the Killian Buckley goal and I suppose the defensive error. A lot of defensive errors made before that. But I think the real, for me, concern for Galway is like Tipperary were terrible. That's as bad as a Tipperary performance you will see against Galway. But yet they were still within a puck of a ball in the 9 minutes of that game. Okay, Galway created the chances, but 50% shooting actually, at this stage of a competition, it's just not good enough. So if they do that again against Limerick, like if they are 50% accurate against Limerick, that's Limerick going to win this game with 7 or 8 points. I think, like you can say, they ground out the result and saw it out, but Tipperary were shocking that day, and I think you can dress it up and talk about as many different ways as you like, but I think if you're a Galway supporter, if I was a Galway supporter, I'd be concerned going into this weekend, based on the last performance against Tipperary.
Yeah, because I think there has been a bit of pragmatism, and based up here in Galway, it's been very quiet, which I think is not a bad thing here for the Galway camp here. Usually just pretty excitement and a bit of hype. It's been very focused, I think, since that Tipperary win. I think the pragmatism of the shot selection, 50% is not going to get done against Limerick. But I think they know historically here, Rory, that they've given Limerick as good as they got in the recent seasons, and they feel the penny is going to drop one of these days. And maybe it's this weekend. Maybe it's the vulnerability of Limerick 4 weeks without a game, that this is maybe the opportunity for Galway to catch Limerick a little bit on the hop here. And given the form, and I suppose the training preparation here has been, I've heard, pretty intense here. Obviously, Jason Flynn's out with the hamstring, But I mean, it's really showing that the preparations have gone up a notch under Henry Shefflin here, and no stone is being left unturned.
Yeah, and Galway are a funny team when it does come to form. They're able to, like, be brutal one week, be brilliant the next week. Even saw that, I suppose, against Dublin in either half. Remember last year against Cork, I thought they were shocking in the quarter final as well, and was giving them no hope going in against Limerick. And then suddenly they went toe to toe with Limerick, and we're right in it coming down into injury time. So it's something that maybe, like, consistency is something that Shefflin's teams always had when he was a player with Kilkenny, and I'd say it's frustrating him with Galway, but they seem to be able to, when they've played Limerick, be right in there. And it's one thing physically, I suppose, as well, that they match up very well. Like against Tipperary, you could just see Galway were just physically a bigger team, and we're willing to get into the dirty stuff a bit more. Like, I think as well, Shefflin has been conscious to kind of not put all hurlers in the forward line as such, and he's a few warriors in there as well, which like even Keenan Fahey, like he's able to win his own ball inside. Kevin Cooney, as we know, and Conor Whelan. That's 3 of your 6 forwards are quite comfortable winning their own ball, which can make a difference when the defence are under pressure and they just need to launch one every now and again. As we know, Limerick have that at the other end. Like, Limerick have ball winners, Tom Morrissey, Gillan. Like they have that. So it's something, I suppose, that teams have been trying to match up with Limerick, and something Shefflin definitely must have been conscious of over the last, his second season involved. So that's why I think they are a bit stronger, even if their performances haven't shown consistency. Just kind of on paper, I think there's more of a balance to their team this year than there was last year. And so yeah, look, I just see it as a very similar one, as in there hasn't been a puck of a ball between most of the top counties this year, and apart from even the last, as Kieran said, it came down to just 2 points in it, even if Galway looked 8-9 points better than them. So it'll be strange if there is a gap on Saturday or Sunday. Although we were saying that last year as well, and we had the Galway and Limerick game was fierce tight, and then you had Kilkenny kind of having a cakewalk against Clare last year in the semi-final. I just don't see that happening this year.
Yeah. And to be fair to Galway, I think Henry Shefflin and the management must be credited for some of the inclusions here. The likes of Glennon came in, ball of energy in the middle third. Tom Monaghan got a tune, 3 points from play. Very key. Linan as well, I thought, had a superb game. And he's a very much an underrated player here in this Galway setup. And I would imagine he will be following whoever is in the half forward. And I suppose, Kieran, that's a question for you. In terms of the half forward position, I know Cian Lynch, there has been injury issues here with Colin O'Neill, David Reedy. Who do you feel may slot in there in that half forward position for Limerick on Saturday?
I think it all boils down to the fitness of Cian Lynch, really, doesn't it? You're hearing things the last couple of days. It's all speculation. It's all rumours that Cian Lynch is flying and training, but until you see him take to the field, look at you listen back to John Kiley's last interview after the Munster final, and he was fairly bullish the fact that the 4-week break was going to give Cian Lynch every chance, and he was fairly confident that we would see Cian Lynch take to the field in Croke Park. And I think that will depend. Look, I think if Cian Lynch is fit, he starts. Centre forward. Obviously Tom Morrissey and Grow Hegarty beside him. But I think for if Declan Hannon does start centre back, I think the question comes in maybe just because of the distribution to the forwards. I think we all know how good Hannon is, and I think that's probably the second best player to do that in the Limerick team could be Reedy, Dave Reedy. Would not be surprised to see him maybe named corner forward, but playing in a deeper role, maybe in front of Morrissey if he was to line out there, just to get ball inside, which would probably be a little bit harsh on Peter Casey. But I just think there's so much unknown with Limerick lining out without Hannon. We've never really had to do it, and I suppose it's I suppose we look at Clare last year when Conlon went off injured before the game, and it was I think a lot of that was probably put down to Conlon not playing, and like he's the quarterback and such in there, and the ball he gives in he's just intelligent players that were there, seem to be in the right place at the right time, and picking up loose ball, and I think that will depend, I suppose, a lot of who plays there. But I think if you look at the other end, I think the matchup is probably for I think we'll see Gallen and Flanagan inside is who will pick up Gallen. I think you look back to the Leinster final and they had Pádraig Mannion on Owen Cody. Obviously he's a good man marker, but I think when you're, tasking him with a job of man marking, Mannion or so good going forward that you're losing that element to your game. But was that a sign? Was that a sign by Shefflin that he didn't trust either cornerback to man mark? So like if you were to pick a player, I suppose for me it would be probably Grealish of the two. But I think if Galway do pick Mannion to man mark Gallen, I think that, going forward they will lose a bit of impotence going forward because of that. But I suppose you're going to talk about matchups all over the field. But I think that like for the last couple of weeks, Gallen has been top form for Limerick, and he's going to take watching, and he's probably going to be the number one player that Galway will be focused on this week.
Yeah.
No, I just think as well, like Garrod McInerney at fullback, if Limerick managed to create the space they did in front of the Galway full back line as they did against Clare the last day, like it was quite telling, I thought, when Jake Morris kind of started to, get a bit lively and they put him in on top of Garrod McInerney, Galway almost immediately substituted Garrod McInerney in the quarter final. So it was kind of a sign maybe that Shefflin didn't fancy that matchup, pace-wise. And it's just, I think McInerney would be fine in the aerial ball with Gallen, but if he gets kind of that space, and as we saw against Clare as well, where he's able to just come on the ball that's bouncing in front of him, like it's very hard for a back to mark him because he has the ability to shoot over his shoulder off left and right, and like he can rack up a score very quickly. So Galway need to really get their matchups right in there. And like, is it worth? I know Dahi Burke has been 6 all year, but surely Shefflin might be thinking about for it's horses for courses, and maybe Dahi Burke, because he'd be a match. Could he be pace-wise on the ground? And as we know, he's very strong in the air as well. But then I suppose it's very late in the year in the championship to take out your 6. But it is the winning and losing of the game, though. If you can at the minute, if you can stop Gallen, and when I say stop them now, hold them to a couple of points from play and stop that goal threat, like the Limerick have been a bit reliant on them this year, whereas in other years they were getting scores from all across the forward line. So that's maybe like what Shefflin needs to do is get that matchup right, if anything, or also even just plug the space in front a bit better than what Clare did. As you were saying, maybe have your Jack Grealish on Gallen, but like cut off that space in front, play your half back line slightly deeper. And with Mannion, Dahi Burke, Joseph Cooney, like it's a formidable enough half back line. If they all hit form, you've that threat going forward as well from Mannion and Cooney, who are well able to take scores. Dahi Burke as well. So it makes for an intriguing setup there with Limerick's half forward line. Key Lynch coming back in possibly, Hegarty as well, just beginning to find form, I thought, against Clare in the Munster final. So that's really going to be Galway's half back line. Limerick half forward line is going to be a titanic battle and probably winning and losing of the game, as well as the Gallen matchup inside.
But I think as well, Rory, if you look at it like over the last couple of years, it'll be a point shootout, because you're not going to see Galway's half backline pushed up the field. They're going to be sitting back. I think they're going to learn a lot from that Munster final and what damage Limerick did to Clare. I think I suppose Gallen especially, but I think you're going to see Galway's. I think there'll be plenty of space in the middle compared to games we've seen this year. I suppose both teams are happy to take points from distance. There are plenty of good sharpshooters out the field, and I think the main concern for Galway this year as well, and I suppose a certain aspect as well as Limerick is form of certain players. And I think one thing I like about Shefflin is he wasn't afraid to drop him. I think Conor Cooney had been struggling for a bit of form, and he was left on the bench. Tom Monaghan as well, probably had the poor year and last year's standards, but I think he's really put his hand up, when he came on the last day and he scored 4 points. So I think it probably nearly be a search to start after that. But I think, to be fair, they're making the big calls when needed. I suppose the only player that's maybe getting a bit of rub of the green is Cloncannon inside, and I think for Galway to win, they're going to need all 15 players firing, but especially Cloncannon, because he can do such damage in front of goal when he's in top form. And I think a couple of games this year we've seen him. Limerick have relied on Gallen, but you can say Galway are relying on Conor Whelan, especially in the last couple of games. He's been incredible, and I think you'd say like Galway will be watching Gillan, but I think equally, Limerick will have to keep an eye on Whelan as well.
Yeah. One guy that we haven't mentioned from Galway, and I think he may play a very pivotal role, is Cathal Mannion, particularly in that midfield area. And I think you might see him do a bit of a quarterback orchestration, certain times go deep, kind of join from deep as well in attacking sense. I think he's a gifted hurler, has all the tricks of the trade. And I think from a Limerick, I think that there's so many fascinating matchups here, guys, isn't it? I mean, even the midfield we haven't even really talked about, but like Darragh O'Donovan, Will O'Donoghue, again, Cathal Mannion's movement here, how are they going to counteract that particularly? Because he will roam, look for ball and look to distribute here if he can early inside. I think Concannon does a great foil for Whelan. Generally do, but I think it's going to be intriguing. I think middle third, there's not going to be much space there, is there? I suppose, guys, even kind of looking at the bench impact, you mentioned Conor Cooney there as well, but head on the block time, guys, in terms of Limerick Galway, who are we fancying to advance to the All-Ireland final in 2 weeks? Kieran, we might start with you first.
As the week goes on, I suppose after Tipperary, the Galway Tipperary game, I was kind of maybe a bit, I won't say cocky, but I was confident, going into it. But I think as the week goes on, you strip it all back and you're looking at Galway's strength, and I suppose physically they're well matched. They have been struggling for form, but I suppose that can be turned around pretty quick as well. I think it'll all come down to I don't think there's going to be much in the game at the end, and I suppose bar Jason Flynn, if Conor Cooney doesn't start, what a player to be bringing on to try and see out a game. I think they've got good game time into players like Lenan and Liam Collins this year, young guys coming in. I suppose Shefflin is really, I think he has developed the squad depth this year from last year, and they're going to be a formidable force. I just think if you look at the year this year, like the form has been flaky, and you could make arguments for Limerick as well, being not the same team they were, but they've been seeing out results. I don't think they were ever poor in a game compared to like what Galway were against Dublin, and so I think it's the same as every year. It all depends what Galway team turns up and takes to the field and what attitude they bring. Like if they turn up and they come to play hurling, like they're as good as any team in the country. But I just think for Limerick, like they've had the 4-week break. I said hopefully we can get Cian Lynch back in the field. Obviously, look, Declan Hannon's a loss, Sean Finn is a loss. But I suppose there is guys who come in there who are more than capable. And I'm sure, look, Killark, seems to have a bit of a magician about him that he can, always seems to make the right decisions and and gets the matchups right. I think the hunger would be there for both teams. I think, look, for Limerick, they're 2 games away from being 4 in a row All-Ireland champions. Jesus, we were being happy with 1, but this is completely bonus territory. But they deserve to match the Kilkenny team of the 2000s. With their 4-win feat. But I just think based on looking at closing out games, like every game Limerick have won this year have been at the minimum, like 0.2 points. They just seem to have an act to it. I think bringing on, like, if Adam English came on the kind of first time we saw him this year, I thought he was impressive. Cathal O'Neill as well, he's got to have a lot of experience over the last year or two. And I suppose, look, they have done it for Limerick coming off the bench. David Reedy, if he doesn't start or play a part early in the game, I do think he's again, it's experience, and Croke Park seems to suit Limerick. And put it back to the 12 finals, 12 wins. Okay, this is a semi-final, but it's very hard to back against them. And I think for me, it's more the heart saying this, but I hope it's Limerick, and I think I think it could be.
Yeah, Rory, get your protection here.
Yeah, like Limerick are going to be stopped at some stage, and like maybe this year with the Sean Finn injury and Hannon injury, like that, it like you're talking about. As Kieran said, like your quarterback Hannon, who is at the centre of starting a lot of Limerick attacks, and then also you have Sean Finn, who's been probably the best cornerback in Ireland for the last 3 or 4 years. So like they're 2 huge losses to take, and so if ever they're going to be beaten, I think this could be the time. Again, Galway, and if you're tipping Galway, you're kind of going off what might happen, as Kieran said, because they are very inconsistent, and if they come with a performance like or have every chance of winning this, I just think that, like, I think they might. I have a feeling this year they are coming with a performance. I don't know. I have a sneaky feeling that Galway might take this one. But here's the thing: one of the two games of the weekend, I think, is going to be a draw. So the game's going to be so that I have a feeling one of the two games will be a draw, and this one is probably the more likely one out of the two, I think, to go to extra time. So yeah, I'm not trying to sit on the fence on that. If I was going to, I think maybe I'm going to give Galway a slight favour. Last week I was favouring Limerick to win the All Ireland, but now, as Kieran says, it gets closer to the game, and you're kind of looking at what Galway are probably capable of as such, and then there are question marks about Limerick about how to deal with the injuries as well. So I'm just going to give Galway the slightest of nods, but at the same time, I'll probably throw a sneaky bet on a draw.
Yeah, I definitely think there's not much between these sides historically. There's great respect between the two counties. I think you just have to go with the champion until the champion is beaten. I think they have to be the favourite here to win here. But I think it's intriguing. I think Galway have a massive opportunity here, just given, I think, the injuries to Limerick's backline here. I think Colin Coughlin's going to probably play a huge role here from Limerick as well. If not starting, definitely coming on, definitely. But I think from a Limerick perspective, probably the team here with 4 weeks to prepare. They got the news of Declan Hannon out early. They've been preparing here in terms of matchups. You can imagine that the likes of John Kiley, Paul Kinnerk, they've devised schemes and game plans here. Wouldn't it be at all surprised if Barry Nash basically slotted into a halfback role or a playmaking role here as well? So I think it's all going to be very intriguingly poised, guys. So I don't think we'll probably know the formations until probably 2 minutes to 6 on Saturday afternoon. But I think, to be fair, I'm just going to hedge it to Limerick. But again, I think it's a glorious opportunity for Galway here. I don't think there's going to be much between these sides. I suppose, guys, the second semi-final on Sunday at 4 p.m. face is Kilkenny versus Clare. And I suppose, Rory, what's the vibe coming out of 6 Mile Bridge heading into the game? I suppose any news on the injury front as well?
Well, what I'm hearing in terms of injuries is kind of mixed. There's a good chance, like, Davy Mack is fine, I heard, and John Conlon is supposedly fine as well. Now, as we know, with concussion, like, that can be, he just, as you know, like, if he gets headaches or anything, even from this moment on, like, then obviously, you know, he won't be fit to play. So it's a day-to-day thing with concussion, but word is anyway fine. Conor Cleary, I heard, probably in more trouble and is less likely to start. So yeah, look, and the Shane O'Donnell injury, I think, was just a rolled ankle, so I think he's been fine. There hasn't been a word of Shane O'Donnell not starting. But it's gas. We were just thinking, like, how tight these camps are now. Like, you hear, you don't know whether to believe any rumor you hear in terms of injuries or whatever, because sometimes you're hearing something that, it's a certainty, and when the team starts, like, that's not the case. Even the last day, like, nobody knew about Davy Mack being injured until, like, it was named that Darragh Lohan was starting instead of him. So things are so are kept so in house now at the minute. You're just kind of speculating. But no, look, it seems to be good news in terms of Conlon and Davy Mack anyway, and hopefully it is, because we just saw last year how central John Conlon is, and Davy Mack's experience as well. He's one of the few guys, along with Conlon and Kelly and O'Donnell from 2013, that's still there, who has that experience of getting to All Ireland final. Now, like, saying that, like, it's really time this Clare team stepped up and delivered, because they haven't been in a final since 2013. They've lost a couple of semi-finals, and like we were talking about, since 2018, there were been Munster final 2017, 2018. Last two Munster finals as well, lost both of them. So it's about time now that that this team kind of delivers to the potential they have. Big factor, I suppose, is our back line is going to be key here, because I think our forward line are, at the minute, with everyone fit, and our forward line are possibly I would think they're the strongest forward line maybe left in the championship. But our problem is, our backs, with Conor Cleary injured, and like, I think we've shipped 13 goals so far in the championship, now, albeit 5 of them were against Tipperary in the first game, but still the only game where we've had a clean sheet was against Waterford, who played no full forward line. yeah, look, that's a worry. And against Kilkenny, as we know, who are a goal-hungry team and always have been, and with Owen Cody and just inside and that goal threat, that constant goal threat they have, it's something that really Clare need to be rock solid at the back on Sunday. If they are rock solid at the back, I think that we'll just about have enough to go over the line. But as we saw last year, like going to Grove Park and giving a performance, it doesn't come natural to every team. And I think Clare is still smarting from last year, and it's been huge motivation for them that they have to come up now and deliver a performance. So I think they will on Sunday. But again, we've talked about question marks in the first game with injuries. Question marks here is again what Clare will do in terms of number 3, and who will pick up the likes of Owen Cody.
Yeah, Kieran, get you in there. I suppose. What are your initial thoughts in terms of this fixture, and what are the key matchups, I suppose, that you're looking forward to seeing on Sunday?
Yeah, I think the main question is, and before you could even make a decision or a prediction on who you think is going to win, is what teams take to the field. I think from a Clare point of view, Rory's mentioned there, Conor Cleary and John Conlon were the main two, you'll be looking at. And let's say if John Conlon and Cleary couldn't play, you'd be kind of definitely hedging to Kenny then. But I think like Owen Cody's a real life threat. I saw him this year, against Wexford, and like he was unbelievable, and it's so hard to handle. He's going to take a lot of attention. But then you've like guys are, I suppose, not household names, but like Massey Keown, and he's nearly a goal a game type of guy. I think Tom Phelan has been having a good form this year. You have TJ thereabouts. I think that for Kilkenny, if they can get Adrian Mullen back on the field, I think it'd be a huge plus. Okay, the fact he's very little hurling played this year, but just the work he gives you around midfield, I think it'd be pivotal to Kilkenny if they're to win this game. Not sure what the word is on him, because it was a fairly serious injury. So, but if they can get him back, I think that's a little bit of a game changer. I think as well, like, what you're going to get with Kilkenny. They bring this attitude and the work rate and this never say die attitude. Like, they could be 10 points down with 5 minutes to go, and in their eyes they're still in the game. And it's very hard. You can't train that into teams. I suppose it's just something that's nearly from the Cody times, I suppose, really. And it's I suppose when you come into that camp, it's embedded into you. It gets you a lot of the way. It's just that work rate and honestly, like, and look at Clare's forward are very potent, but I suppose it's at the back is where their question marks are going to be. And I suppose who plays, like if Owen Cody, as I said, is going to take huge marking. And they will, teams playing Clare, because they've conceded 13 goals, are going to attack Clare. I think we think Kilkenny this year traditionally they like the long ball in, and they've been mixing up a bit this year. But I suppose out of all teams left, they're the one team that will put it in long, and I suppose Clare will have to be on their game all day. But I think at the other end, then you're looking at Mikey Butler and Tony Kelly. We've seen the duels they've had over the last couple of seasons, and I think to be fair, Mikey Butler has had the one up on Kelly, I suppose, a couple of times, and I think Kelly is in top form this year. Can't see him getting 3-4 on Sunday, but I think if Mikey Butler can keep Kelly to within a couple of scores, I think that'll give Kilkenny every chance. Look, it's going to be easier tasks than done. I think it's not just Kelly. I think you look at Mark Rogers, the last 2 games, really good form, really scoring, very good scoring from him. Shane O'Donnell, the work you're going to get. Aidan McCarthy, I think he's missed, injured the last day, and don't think he was right against Limerick either. He was taken off very early. Even just for his frees, he's a very good free taker. Just to have him there, I suppose, because look, it's another factor of Clare's game is their shooting accuracy. We've seen it nearly every day this year. And if they turn up on Sunday with 50 or 55, 60% shooting accuracy, it's not going to be enough. I think there's going to be huge improvements needed in that for Sunday. Every chance they create, they're going to have to take it. And I suppose, look, at this stage of the competition, you'd expect that anyway. But it's just, I suppose, you'd expect huge improvements. We didn't see it. I suppose it was a factor in the Limerick game in the Munster final. It didn't seem to get any better against Dublin. And you look, in reality, I think the scoreboard kind of flattered Clare in the end. But if Clare start that game on Sunday like they started against Dublin, they could be out of it within 20 minutes because Clare were flat against Dublin. And I think Dublin were right in that game up to maybe the goal started coming in before half time. But I think Clare need to go at it from the start, and I suppose that accuracy. And I think one more thing to worry about for Clare is are Kilkenny a bit of a hoodoo team for him. I was looking there this evening, since 1932. I hope I don't scare you now, Roy, with this one. They've only beaten Kilkenny once out of 8 fixtures in championships. So, added that to the fact it's in Croke Park, and I suppose Kilkenny are Croke Park specialists with all the experience they've had there. And, I suppose if Clare do manage to beat Kilkenny, I suppose it'll be kind of creating a little bit of history, getting over Kilkenny as well. So I think, I think it was like Limerick in 2018 when they beat Kilkenny in that quarter final. It was then I think people started to believe, because I suppose Limerick found it hard to get over Kilkenny over the years as well. So there's what happened in the past isn't going to have a major, isn't a major factor this weekend. But I suppose it's the noise and the background noise of the players. If it gets in, it can have a negative effect. But as I said, these days I think that the media and all that noise is kind of they're well wrapped in cotton wool away from all that.
Yeah, Rory, get you in there as well. I mean, 12 months ago, the All-Ireland semi-final between Kilkenny and Clare. I mean, a bit like Galway here, there's an opportunity here to right a few wrongs from last year, I suppose. From Brian Lowe and James Moore and the management perspective of Clare, how do you see that they will set up here? And are they going to throw a different look to Kilkenny compared to what they did 12 months ago?
Yeah, I suppose a couple of things from last year, if you remember as well, like Rory Hayes went into a spiral of bad form. He had a poor Munster final and then was substituted after 10 minutes against Wexford. And he's been excellent since he got back into the team this year. Adam Hogan as well has strengthened the back line. Mark Rodgers has been fully fit this year. He actually only came in as a sub last year against Kilkenny, scored 3 points, I think, as well as he came in. He just came in second half substitute. So also, as I mentioned, Shane O'Morey is back. Clare are a lot stronger this year, even if they haven't quite hit. And I wouldn't be too worried. I know Kieran is saying our percentage, but the day to hit that is your All-Ireland semi-final day. They've had something now to work on since the Munster final and the quarter final. And I suppose when they look back at tape, it's actually some of the decisions they're making, like shooting when there's a player in a far better position. Is probably a criminal one, as we saw at the Munster final. There was one Aidan McCarthy when he had Mark Rodgers 10 yards in front of him, and he was immediately substituted after that. Free taking as well, as we saw last year. Another thing is TJ Reid's free taking, as we know, he's the best free taker in the country, and Clare's discipline needs to be spot on. And at the other end, we need to be punishing Kilkenny, and we can't afford to be wayward with frees because we have been since the championship this year. Started Aidan McCarthy had a great day against Tipperary and frees, and then since then we've been a bit erratic on them. Mark Rodgers the last day was excellent, but with Aidan McCarthy back fit, what happens with free taking? And I just think in the Munster final as well, we had 4 long range frees, and all 4 were wide, weren't even kept in play. So there's 4 of the wide straight away that we chalked up. So you'd wonder at a certain range, surely they have the stats worked out and percentage chances. Is it worth spraying a ball into corner forward or just lobbing one in around the edge of the square rather than going for a low percentage one? These are all things like that. To beat Kilkenny, you have to kind of come right for you. I just think, I just think that the motivation from last year should really stand to Clare. Again, if Cleary and Conlon were both out, as Kieran said, that would be a huge worry. That's your spine right down the centre of your back line. Word is Conlon will be fine. And as I mentioned, Clare have had 6-7 weeks now with Cleary injured, so it's not a shock to them. Whereas last year it was basically morning of the game we realised Conlon wasn't going to be playing, which it was hard probably to adjust for management and players alike. So I think they're in a much better place. Just forward line as well. Last year Clare were a bit reliant on Kelly, and this year I remember we had that game up in Ennis where Kelly scored 1 point, but yet the rest of the forwards scored 322, or the rest of the team scored 322. So that's no longer really a factor. If Kelly plays well now, it's a bonus as well, because he lifts the crowd and everything, but they're no longer fully reliant on him. I just have a good feeling about this one, and I know, like you were saying, the last time Clare beat them was '97 in All Ireland semi-final. But if you keep getting yourself in there and giving yourself chances, like, you will improve that record. And I think they're in a great spot to improve it this time around. Again, the major thing is keeping Kilkenny's goal threat down. Like, if 1 to 2 goals max, I think 2 goals max is what Clare need to concede in terms of goals. And I reckon our forwards might have enough at the other end to win if we can hold Kilkenny to that. But that is an if.
Just 2 points I want to make there as well, Mark, is, Kilkenny aren't any saints for conceding goals either. I think you look back to, like, against Antrim, they conceded 3 goals, and against Wexford, the last round game, they conceded 4. So I think they'll have their own worries, and I think there's maybe a few question marks on Hugh Lawler, full back. Talking to a few Kilkenny guys over the last couple of weeks, and I think they're, I don't think he's as rock steady, I suppose, as the defenders have been used to over the years. So there is, like, I suppose, while Kilkenny will try and target Clare for goals, it's going to work the other way around as well. I think Clare will see a couple of goals after Kilkenny backs. And I think the point you made, Rory, as well, is Clare's discipline. I think they've been lucky this year in getting away with certain things. Look at Limerick are no saints. They play on the edge as well, but just like silly frees, clocking up yellows. And I think on the day, depending on the referee, like, I think if Clare pick up a red card, how that it could be detrimental to the cause. And I just think that they've been, the 2 cornerbacks have been, they've been, manhandling, and look at all in.
Paul Kinnerk invented that. He calls it grappling.
Grappling, yeah. Did he invent the simulation as well?
Well, Diarmuid Burns has been known to simulate at times. We won't go into it.
Only once or twice. No, but just, I think, like, Clare do play on the edge, similar to what Limerick do. And look, we've seen a raft of red cards over the years, and I think for Clare, like, it's to be mindful of that. Not to be, I suppose, look at giving away early yellows, especially for the cornerbacks, or where you're going to have one Cody, similar to what the threat they saw with Gallagher a couple of weeks ago. You don't want a cornerback picking up a yellow card, and and put an opportunity where he might have to pull down Cody or someone else, and you're picking up a red card. It's it's an uphill task straight away.
And I think of all pitches to concede a red in Croke Park is just, there's so much space teams can find there that like, it hasn't gone well for teams of late. We're thinking of the All-Ireland final there with Kilkenny to Perry a few years ago. Like, it's just, like, teams will find space if you're down to 14 of all places in Croke Park, So for any side this weekend, like, they have to, try and keep 15 on the pitch, will be crucial.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, massive occasions here, but I suppose Kilkenny as well do have the injury worries. I think you mentioned in terms of Adrian Mullen there, Kieran. I suppose Richie Reid as well probably would be a key cog back there. Granted, Blanchfield came in centre half back, didn't do a whole pile wrong. And, from that perspective, there's a few injuries here for Kilkenny that probably need to clear up. But I suppose, guys, an awful lot of bench impact probably to really talk about. But Rory, in terms of that full-back slot then, let's say, argument's sake, Conor Cleary is out. Who do you feel is going to be most equipped to deal with a TJ Reid or even a Massey Keown inside for Clare to do the job on Sunday?
Yeah, I suppose kind of what you don't want to do is just end up putting your, spreading your team all over the place and, to make up for, like, because as I said, Adam Hogan and Rory Hayes have been going quite well. So there's no point, making too many switches for one change, as we say. Shane Murray has been doing fine too. It depends, like, I suppose Kilkenny are probably going to go 2 inside as well, and it depends on the 2 inside. If they're going, like, I presume Cody will be one of those 2, so you have to physically be able to match up with them as well. Like, I'm thinking of Conor Fennelly over the years being on the edge of the square and high ball in. Clare have to be able to deal with that. And that was what Conor Cleary kind of gives you. He is strong in the air and physically strong. If his man wins the ball, try and keep him outside. So, yeah, it's getting like, and the thing about, let's say, Adam Hogan, Hayes, Shane Murray, they're all cornerbacks as such. Like, none of them is a fullback. And even Adam Hogan probably has the most experience at fullback, but this is his first year playing senior, Are you going to throw him in there on Owen Cody? I don't think so. Like, that is a question for Clare to deal with. like we know Dermot Ryan is strong in the air and everything, but like he's been going so well at wing back, like that I don't think he's going to go at the half back line. David McInerney is an interesting one in that if he's fit, he slotted in there against Cork for a while, if you remember, at the edge of the square. The only thing about David McInerney is I find that he, which is fine wing back, he goes up for every ball with his hand, and he catches most. But when you're on the edge of the square and you don't catch it, it's basically a goal to the opposition. So something maybe he might need to adjust slightly. And I'm sure Lohan will have wise words about dealing with high ball in full back line. It's just at the other end as well, talking about Hugh Lawler, like last year, Clare put Duggan in there, and like Hugh Lawler got the better of Duggan in the air. And I hope Clare management have learned from that and maybe pick a different type of player. Because as Kieran said, like he's been exploited this year so far inside. Maybe put a more live wire full forward in there on Lawler and try and do something like what Limley said.
Could you see Shane O'Donnell maybe full forward then?
Yeah, I think Clare maybe have underutilised O'Donnell inside in the full forward in at times. I know he does great work in the half forward, and maybe slot him in there every now and again for 10 minutes and give them something else to think about. Rogers could be a player that could cause them trouble as well, because low ball in front of Rogers, Lawler find it very hard to deal with that, Again, it's the type of ball that has been in there as well. I thought last year we had Ian Galvin in one corner and David Reedy in the other, and Duggan in full forward, and we just hit high ball after high ball in the first 10 minutes. And when Duggan wasn't in the two corners, weren't going to win the high ball either. It was the type of ball we hit in was really poor. So look, I think there's still a bit. Clare can't dismiss that match last year either. Clare need to look back at it and just see where they got matched up completely wrong, and certain aspects of the game. I thought as well with Kelly last year, there was often times where right in front of me in the first half where Kelly was kind of making runs and loose and looking for, let's say, a short 10-yard pass that just wasn't coming. Instead, we were ballooning ball from distance. So that's something like you want your best player getting on the shots. He's the guy who should be at the end of the move. Not kind of being ignored at times. It's like a story from Kilkenny years ago when they were on the bus up to Ireland and somebody shouted out, I think Nicky Brennan was the manager, like, well, what's the game plan today, Nicky? On the bus, and he said, Plan A, get the ball to DJ. Plan B, get the ball to DJ. So, the plan for Clare really should be as often as possible, get Kelly on the ball, He makes things happen for them. But, look, I just think Clare are in a better place than last year. I just hope to bring a big performance. And, I've just a feeling that they might get over the line this time.
Yeah, so Rory, I suppose Clare for you?
Yeah, without any real confidence here, just this could be the hard speaking, but I know in terms of, like, as I said, last year didn't perform. That has to be a stick to beat them with for the last few weeks. Had a much, like the Munster final last year took a lot out of Clare, the extra time, and they threw everything at Limerick and still didn't win the game. Whereas this year, I thought Clare played poorly in the Munster final and still could have won it. It was kind of a different feel to the game. And then Dublin, like they didn't have to dig too deep against Dublin either. It wasn't like the Wexford game where it came down, to the last 10 minutes and last year. So I think they're in a different place coming into this game. And as Kieran said, like this Kilkenny team, like haven't, like last year All Ireland final, they were a bit off Limerick. I know the scoreboard kind of told a different story. I'm still not 100% fully convinced by this Kilkenny team, And hopefully on Sunday, the Clare will just have enough.
Yeah. Kieran, who are you tipping?
I think for me, it all depends. I suppose on the teams that take to the field. I think if it's the case like Conor Cleary and Conor were there, you'd have to tip Kilkenny. But I think, look, if you're both teams coming onto the field with close to 15, I think Clare will learned a lot of lessons from last year. I do think though they'll have to hit the ground running because Kilkenny are going to come at them from the start. And that starts against Dublin. Like if this happens again, they could be out of the game very early. But I just think Clare, I think there's a bit more about them this year. I think beating Limerick would have given them so much confidence going forward that they've been thereabouts them. I suppose to finally get the win, especially in the Gaelic grounds as well. Will do them the world of good. But I suppose I do think Clare. Yeah, I think if they're strong as close to strong as 15 can start, I think Clare will win it. But I suppose I'd worry that if they didn't win, where would this team go from here? I think Lohan has been there 4 years now, and they've been thereabouts every year, bar the bringing home a few trophies. So I think like this is the year for Clare that if they have aspirations of winning trophies, and bringing home that I think this could be the year because like the Conlon isn't getting any younger, and Shane O'Donnell, these guys as you mentioned, they were there in 2013, and they've miles on the leg, so I think they'll be kind of to be I think this year they've put wrongs right already this year, but I think this is a major one for them. This was the huge stumbling block last year for them, and probably a humiliating defeat in the end when they were confident going up for that semi-final. So I think they'll learn a lot from it. I think I'm going to tip Clare and we'll get the trilogy.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah, just my concern for Clare would be the 3-6 combination if it was the occasion where Rory and Kieran, if Conor Cleary's not there in the full back line, be prepared for aerial ball with Owen Cody and TJ Reid inside. And I think that first 10 minutes is going to be absolutely key. Like I remember back 2007, Kilkenny, they peppered ball and Teddy Brennan and Henry Shefflin. Hey, presto, the game's over. It's a contest for 15 minutes. I think that's the worst case scenario for Clare. But if they can get through that, I think the run game for Clare is pretty significant here, particularly in that middle third. We've seen with Galway, we've seen with Wexford, particularly against for Kilkenny. They really don't like defending that sort of situation. And as you say, goal scoring opportunities do arise. I think Clare, for me, have to put up or shut up on Sunday. If they don't, then look, I think there's, as you say, Kieran, I think there's massive question marks over the legacy here for Brian Lohan, and I think for a few of the Clare senior guys here that have been there for many a year. So I think Clare, the motivation is there for them. And I think the bench impact as well. If Aidan McCarthy can come on for 15, 20 minutes, hit a few insurance scores here, Ian Galvin as well. Everyone off the bench is going to have to really deliver here for Clare. So I'm going to go Clare, I think, 2-3 points. But it is contingent on the fact that if 3 and 6 are out for Clare, that's huge. Their first choice guys here as well. But again, I think there's plenty of motivation here, Rory, for Clare to right the wrongs. And I think similar for Galway here as well, that makes Clare and Galway such dangerous opponents here for these provincial champions anyway. So, I'll go for Clare as well. And,
Jesus, all three of us going for Clare. Can I change my mind now? I'm worried.
Well, look.
I think as well, look at Kilkenny in that Leinster final. Okay, they went 8 points up. But there was a 10-point swing in that second half where Galway went from 8 points down to 2 points up. So that was a complete, for me, a folding in that half. And I was at that Wexford game, the last league or the round robin game, and like there was times in that game like Kilkenny were like they're probably a little bit Jekyll and Hyde where they've been strong in games and then they kind of switch off. It was similar in that Wexford game where they got 2 goals early in the game and like they were 7 points up, but yet they went in at half time, a couple of points down. So I think if Kilkenny can turn it on and keep it on for the 70 minutes, it'll be very hard to beat. But if they're in and out of games like they probably have been, I think that'll be a really Achilles heel for them.
Yeah, I think for Clare, it's just they have to keep going for 70 minutes. There is going to be that 1-2, 1-3 burst from Kilkenny. It's how they're going to respond here, that they don't get dejected, get the immediate response here. Because really, Galway did show in that third quarter when they went 8 points down, when they went through the lines, when they really did pass diagonally into the likes of Conor Whelans, the Kincannons, and also Kevin Cooney's as well. They created space inside, which was absolutely key. So I think there's plenty of optimism here, I think, for Clare. Now, Kilkenny, we all know what Kilkenny are all about. But again, there is kind of, I would say, some question marks, particularly if a few of the injuries don't clear up, particularly if the Richie Reeds and maybe the Adrian Mullins don't start here. It's really kind of testing the depth chart again off the bench. So, look, I think it's intriguingly poised here. And I think this is probably the more open game of the two because I think we can see Limerick and Galway being fairly congested in that middle third. So I think plenty of fireworks there anyway. So I think we're tipping Clare. And look, it's kind of a mixed bag in terms of Limerick and Galway anyway. So it'll be a pretty exciting finish. I suppose, guys, we haven't even mentioned the Camogie Championship because we're into the All-Ireland quarter-final stage in senior Camogie. I know there's been an awful lot of backdrop in terms of the protests, the support from the Intercounty Mail, captains of the Gaelic football and hurling counties, in terms of the welfare, the charter for the LGFA, Camogie and GA to consolidate and merge. But I suppose, Rory, there's some intriguing matchups. Tipperary and Antrim obviously starting the All-Ireland quarter-final series in Croke Park on Saturday. But then we have an intriguing game on Sunday before this Kilkenny-Clare game with Cork and Kilkenny. One of the juggernauts of Camogie hurling out in the quarterfinals. So an awful lot to be looking forward to, particularly in the Camogie Championship.
Yeah, and Tipperary have been the surprise team this year. They had a poor campaign last year as such, but they've players back in this year with Cottevan, Eamon McGrath up front. There's plenty of scoring. They went down last week and were 2 points up on Kilkenny, a dominated second half, but Kilkenny being Kilkenny hung in there and got a draw. So Tipperary's topped that group still, with Kilkenny All-Ireland champions in it. So that's really, to run the cat amongst the pigeons this year. And it is great to see it being a bit more competitive this year as well. Waterford are real contenders as well. They easily went through their group. They're straight into a semi-final with Galway. Which that's given us this Cork and Kilkenny match, which it's unbelievable that one of these two teams will be knocked out this area in the championship. That hasn't happened for years, because for the last number of years it's been Cork, Kilkenny, Galway. One of those three have won it, and they've been the final pairings as well. So it makes for an interesting one. Antrim as well have really come along. Roisin McCormack being their star player. She won a Ashburn Cup with TUD there. This year was their star forward. So Tipperary can't afford to take Antrim too lightly either. So that's the and it's great that these games are the curtain raisers. It gives them a big day. It gives a chance for people to realise the standard now at senior camogie level, and some of the scores that you'll see in it. The standard has really, really come up in recent years, and just even the pace of the game has moved on, and conditioning, everything else has come on. A lot of these teams, they've a set up like an intercounty team and senior intercounty men's team as well, in terms of resources they have behind them. So that leads us into the game on Sunday, which, as we've mentioned, Cork and Kilkenny. And Kilkenny being below par this year. I know the league, you kind of forgive them for the league, because being All-Ireland champions and coming in often, can be give yourselves a chance to find your feet again. But in the group as well, they drew at Wexford, drew with Tipperary, so their only win was over Dublin in the group. So they really need to find their feet fast, because Cork had a very impressive win over Clare up in Ennis at the weekend. Clare had rang Galway close the previous week, and Cork, it was a do-or-die game. Whoever won was going to go through. And Cork had a big win up in Ennis. So Cork seemed to be finding form coming into this, and because of that, I'd probably tip Cork just about against Kilkenny. And then obviously Tipperary, with the form they've shown, should have enough to get over Antrim.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I'm really looking forward to it. Particularly the first game, Tipperary and Antrim, I think could be a very intriguing one, because Antrim coming in with a lot of momentum from last year. So as you say, Tipperary, with their good performance against Kilkenny last weekend, they're going to have to back this up, particularly in HQ. So look, that Cork Kilkenny game, one of the big teams out as well. So it'll be very interesting to see who gets knocked out there. There'll be plenty of post-mortems either in Cork and Kilkenny if that was to happen to them. So yeah, all to look forward to. Just breaking news here while we're on, Galway have announced their team for the Limerick All-Ireland semi-final, and there's no changes from the team that played Tipperary in the quarterfinals. So again, the only positional change that I see here is Dahi Burke has gone into fullback, Gerald McInerney at 6. I suppose, guys, immediate reaction here.
Do you take it with a pinch of salt? I think until 6 o'clock, for 5 to 6 on Saturday evening, you'll know your starting team. I suppose, it's really hard to know. I think, as Rory said earlier, Dahi 6 might be a viable option, or Dahi Burke at 3. I think it might be a little bit harsh on Monaghan if he doesn't start. I think he definitely put his hand up the last day. But obviously, I suppose he's rewarding the players who are on top form or on better form. I think Cooney was, he's probably up and down games this year. So, I suppose maybe he's looking at the finish. I think Tipperary, Galway probably saw that Tipperary game, and the subs saw it out for him. So maybe he's looking at that aspect come Saturday.
Absolutely. I can name the team here: Éanna Murphy in goal, Jack Grealish, Dahi Burke and Darren Morrissey in the full back line, half back line, Pádraig Mannion, Gerald McInerney and Joseph Cooney, midfield of Sean Lennon and Cathal Mannion, Ronan Glennon, Keenan Fahey and Kevin Cooney in the half forward line, and Conor Whelan, Brian Concannon, Evan Nyland in the full forward line. And again, we're looking at the bench here, likes of the Fintan Burks, Adrian Toohey there as well, Liam Collins, Tom Monaghan, Conor Cooney, Gavin Lee, and also Jarlath Mannion as well from Capitackle, basically getting a call up here, given Jason Flynn's injury. So look, Galway have set their stalled out. So I think we'll get some intriguing team news in the next day or so. I suppose, guys, we'll leave it there. It's been a lengthy one tonight, but I think we've plenty to cover. Many thanks, Rory, and many thanks, Kieran, for your time tonight. Enjoy the games over the weekend. I suppose next week, let's review these All-Ireland Senior Championship semi-finals. Let's see where they were won and lost, and really look ahead to the All-Ireland, and also looking at the Camogie Championship. Quarterfinals will be in the books as well, so we may have a look at the All-Ireland semi-finals in that competition as well. I suppose until next week, guys, have a good weekend and chat next week.
Thanks, Mark.
Cheers, Mark.